So today's exploration is going to be an Ask a Scientist, a little different than what you guys are used to. We have four amazing speakers that are going to kind of talk to you about how they got into science, what they've done so far, and what brought them into science. And we're going to hear from Farrah Mohammed, Joseph Williams, Yanina Sica, and Olivia Meisner. So with that, I'll hand it off to Farrah.
Hi, good evening. Thanks again for inviting me. I'm Farrah, as Karthika mentioned, and I feel really lucky to be here to speak with you all kind of about my journey in science. So I'm going to take you guys on a little flight path here. And so first, I'm just going to talk a little bit about growing up, my journey through college, how I kind of figured things out in the end and saw that science was the answer. So I was born in New York, but I was raised in a country called Trinidad. If you don't know where Trinidad is, it's a little tiny island in the Caribbean. And how my family got here is that my grandparents were brought from India as indentured slaves to cut sugarcane in Trinidad. And because of this history of colonialism, not only was I the first person in my family to go to college or grad school, but I was also the first person in my family, well, my first generation in my family to go to high school even. So these are my aunt and my uncle, and they raised me mostly. And then here are just some cute baby pics of my life in Trinidad. So after this, my family and I emigrated to Miami, and I kind of went between Miami and Trinidad growing up. And so this is my immediate family, and this is my mom and my dad. And maybe similar to many of you or not, my parents actually divorced when I was a teenager. And so my siblings were doing their own thing. They're much older than I was. And so I kind of felt like I needed some refuge. So I really sought that in school. And I wanted to kind of find myself, distract myself a little bit. So I tried a lot of things. So I was in math club. I tried criminal justice. I even tried drama. But something that resonated with me was biology. Somehow it clicked. I was always a really curious child, and I started to figure out how the human body worked, how the environment worked, a little bit about physics, just like how we talked a little bit about the tides previously. And I thought that was really cool. And I had a professor who really, or teacher that really believed in me and said, hey, you can go to college, because in my high school, not a lot of people really went to college. And so I had some really nice mentors. And that's how I ended up going to the University of Miami. And here is the college where I started to explore biology. And I didn't have a lot of people to look up to. And so all that my family heard was, if you like science and you're smart, you should be a doctor. So I thought, okay, I should be a medical doctor. So I studied biology on a pre-medical track, and then here's something called the anatomy fashion show we did, where we kind of painted our bodies as different diseases. And while it was fun and I did enjoy science classes, and I thought it was really cool, I also really enjoyed teaching. And during teaching, I started hearing about scientists and the work that scientists do. And I thought maybe research is something that I could enjoy. But I was like on such a different path. I was a little bit nervous about it. So I continued my medical training, but I had to admit I wasn't very excited while I was training. And I kept feeling not fulfilled as I was looking at doctors and learning about, being a good doctor to a patient. And, I thought I wanted to make kind of a more broad impact than just one person. Like I was craving something more. So during the summers and winters, I ended up traveling with a company called Global Brigades, and we went to Nicaragua and Panama. And here we end up doing a lot of construction work. And so this is like more along the broad impact I think I was looking for. So we were helping with plumbing systems, so building toilets and water lines. And this kind of helped prevent a lot of infectious disease because people were bathing in water that was very dirty. And I saw that this was a way to empower communities because we were working alongside them, and they were able to maintain the things that we were building. And I saw this as a really good avenue. And so then I started thinking maybe public health, because this kind of efforts to impact broad global communities is in the realm of public health. And I thought maybe that's a passion that I should look into, and maybe some research I should look into. So I applied for some funding, and I was really lucky and I got it. And I was able to do some research in South Africa. So here's kind of where I think I solidified my love for research. So, of course, there were some really cool animals I got to see. If you love elephants or lions, um, but most importantly, I got to meet really awesome people. There are these communities that I worked in Limpopo. They're led by really strong, amazing women. And the research that we did here, kind of looking at how they were able to feed their families and work, helped us affect some policy, which means it helped these lawmakers kind of think deeply about how these women live their lives and support their families. And so I saw, okay, maybe research is the avenue I should go down because I'm getting to make a really broad impact. But I still miss the biological sciences. I missed learning about biology and chemistry. And I was thinking, is there a way for me to kind of do this in a broader context? So I went back to school, and here I found a lab where I basically was studying how to make these devices, which are they're just electrodes that you can implant in the brain, and they help you kind of move better, increase mobility, how to make that more compatible with your actual brain. And I had a good time, and I even won an award in bioengineering for it. And I was like, wow, could I be a scientist? You know, a biologist entering engineering seems really hard, but I had a professor that actually came to me and said, hey, maybe you should rethink this medical doctor thing. Maybe you should come into engineering. But I graduated. I was still unsure. I was torn between science and medicine, um, well, investigative medicine. And that kind of led me to my Fulbright in Galicia, Spain, which is basically a grant that allows you to teach. I was able to kind of do this research where we made a vegan leather. You can see right here. Not that cute, but very interesting. Made out of kombucha is what the leather is made out of. I got to meet the King of Spain, which was awesome. But most importantly, you get to have fun. So I tried capoeira. I got to go to some cool football games or soccer, and even see an aurora. So throughout this whole time, something that I kept doing though is I kept listening to Star Talk, which is a podcast by Neil deGrasse Tyson, and it kind of solidified that I should probably go into research. She talked a lot about astrophysics and neuroscience and all different topics. And I realized I really like learning, and I think a PhD or a degree to become a scientist with a doctorate is the route I should go. And that's how I ended up at Yale. I came here to work under this professor named Jiangming Zhou, and we study nanoparticles, which, if you're hearing about this COVID vaccine, that's what we use. So basically, it's like a package, and you can put different things in it. Here you see some genetic material, you can put drugs, you can put different therapies. But I study specifically in the context of the brain. So seeing how we can use these nanoparticles to treat stroke and different things, and also have some fun as well. Open labs is something that I really like to be participating in. Maybe you've seen me when we were able to be in person. Also, I really think, continuing to empower women and scientists in STEM is important as well. So I'm involved in the Society of Women Engineers, and just having some trivia nights with my fellow engineers is fun as well. So thank you very much for having me. Feel free to ask anything.
Thank you, Farah. So yeah, if you guys have questions, please put that in the chat. And also feel free to ask her if you're in her breakout room. So thank you so much. That was really cool. Apparently we have a lot of startup fans. Okay, so next, continuing on with the theme of broader impacts. So we have Joseph, who is a master's student in public health. So he'll be talking to you about his path.
So my name is Joseph Williams. I'm studying public health at Yale. And my story is a lot like Farrah's, but a little bit different because I am doing research, but I would like to go on to clinical medicine. And so what I'm going to cover is sort of some stuff about me when I was your age, my journey through high school. I went to a community college for a little while, went to a 4-year school, went to graduate school, and like everybody else, I'm thinking about what I want to do in the future and what I want to do when I grow up. And so when I was your age, I had a lot of interests. I was interested in doing music. I play the piano, drums, and guitar. I did some theater as well. That was something I did with my family, and it was a good way for us to bond. I played soccer. I also did lacrosse and some football. But I also really enjoyed hiking and being outside, and that was something that always interested me. But I never thought of that as something that was scientific. I never was terribly interested in science. I was interested in sports because that's what I did with my friends, and I was interested in music and sort of the liberal arts. But science wasn't something that was terribly interesting to me. In fact, I wanted to join a rock band or do plays on Broadway or something. I never really thought of myself as a scientist, and I thought that the lab sciences were like kind of a little boring, not a whole lot of human interaction. But similar to Farrah, I went outside of the U.S. and got to see a little bit of what science could do. A church that I was a part of, we went down to Guatemala, and the organization we partnered with some local communities down there. And we set up a clinic, and so I pretty much just kept some of the kids occupied while their parents or their family members were getting medical treatment. And this was a girl that I was talking to, and I was just really amazed, that there were people that went to school and learned lots of things, and they were able to make the lives of other people across the world better. They were able to do surgeries and sort of do public health, like what Farrah mentioned, making sort of the living environment less susceptible to infectious diseases and things. So I went to Guatemala, and then when I came back, I talked to my mom, and apparently she had a copy of Grey's Anatomy, which is not to be mistaken for the TV show. So Grey's Anatomy is this textbook that talks all about the human body and how we work in like our internals, like our heart, our lungs, our vasculature, blood and stuff. And so I got a copy of that, and I didn't understand most of it because it's really, really complex, but I really liked it. And that's when some friends of mine and people that I value their opinion a lot said, hey, well, why don't you get some experience? And so I became an EMT. I went to a community college and was fortunate enough to do some at high school. And I became an EMT, and I worked for a company called MedStar. It's sort of like the one that you have in New Haven. If you call 911, I would have showed up, and I would have been able to talk to you and figure out what was going on, why, what is the emergency, and sort of how to handle stressful situations. But I learned about science when I was an EMT. How the human body works, and what goes on, like on that molecular, very tiny level that allows us to breathe. How does our blood take oxygen from one place to another? That's all science. How we work is all science. And so I became an EMT, and sort of that was my introduction to medicine. And so I followed that passion, and I went to a 4-year college. This is me and my buddy after we graduated. The goal was, okay, I want to go to medical school. This is something that I'm really interested in. I did some lab work. I studied biochemistry, and it wasn't something that I was terribly interested in. I wanted to do a science that was more, face to face. I get to interact with people, have conversations, more macroscopic, so big picture, rather than the very small picture. And so I stumbled on public health and became passionate about epidemiology, which is the study of diseases among populations. COVID-19 is a disease all over the world, and so epidemiologists study that. And what I think is really fun about this picture to the right is, you have all these variables, and they're looking at, this human figure, and they're looking at statistics, and they're looking at chemicals and vaccines, and all of this is related to public health. And so I became passionate about that, and actually did some work for a little while, studying, drug addiction and mental health. But then I decided, and this is just sort of some other things about epidemiology. So I worked in that field, but then I decided, I wanted to go back to graduate school to learn a little bit more about public health before I go on to think about doing clinical medicine. I was accepted to Yale School of Public Health, and I studied chronic diseases. So, diabetes, or heart diseases and things like that. And because of my past experience, I'm really interested in global health. How can the things that I'm doing here and now and learning about, how can that affect other people that, might have things that affect their well-being in their life? And especially, like maternal and child health. And so these are just a few pictures of some of those things. And so when I look back at sort of my journey and how I sort of learned about science, what I found out is that I was just pursuing my passions. And so the best advice that I can really give to anyone that's thinking about going into science or anything is, like pursue what you're passionate about with your hands open, and then, you might just be surprised at where life brings you. So if you have any questions or anything, feel free to put them in the chat or ask later on.
Thank you so much. That was really awesome. So yeah, just continuing on. Next, we have Yanina, and she's a research associate in ecology, and so she's going to be talking to you guys about her path.
Well, thank you for the introduction. I am Yanina. I'm from Argentina in South America. And yes, I wanted to share with you my story from being nature enthusiast and animal lover to working as a scientist at Yale. So the story starts right at the very beginning. As a kid, I really loved animals and spending time outside. My parents had a lot to do with that. Here are some pictures of them taking me camping and to different national parks, and they were always teaching me cool things about animals and about the environment and how not to be afraid of wildlife, not to touch them, but also not to be afraid. Not even of domestic animals or anything. So they had a lot of influence, and I enjoyed a lot being outside and being surrounded by nature. But then I was growing up, and in high school, I was not really interested at all in science. I was actually very bad at maths and physics and all those things that we immediately relate to science, until a person mentioned biology. And we've heard a lot about biology from Farrah and Joseph, but actually biology is just this natural science that studies life and living organisms. So that obviously intrigued me. But I still wasn't really sure what a biologist do. We've heard the last presentations where they were mentioning a lot on the medicine side and how a lot of biologists works in the lab, working with studying the smallest molecules like DNA or different cells or different parts of the body. But there's also another group of biologists that do not work at the lab and go outside and work in the field and study the environment and animals. And obviously, I was really intrigued by that. So I decided to study biology. In Argentina, the education system is a little bit different. So the degree in biology was a very long degree. It's almost like 6 years. So at the very beginning, it involved a lot of maths, chemistry, physics. I was not really enjoying that part so much. But well, I kept with it, and eventually I started taking classes that I liked a little bit more, like the ecology classes. Ecology is a branch from biology that studies organisms and how they relate to each other and with the environment, and I really love that. So these are some of the pictures from some of those classes where we got to go to the field. So I did study. I went to the jungle in the north part of Argentina. In that place, in the second picture, you can see me trying to climb a palm to get the seeds out of the top of the palm tree. I went to wetlands and studied vegetation. And I even catch some birds to measure, to take some measures out of them. So that was, I really enjoyed that part and all those classes. And I was learning so much, and I was so intrigued on how species were interacting with the environment that I decided to go into research and trying to get a PhD. Nobody in my family ever got a PhD or went to graduate school, so that was very new for me, and that was scary at the same time. But I decided to do it anyway. I was studying how changes in the environment affected species, affected birds, in particular, changes that were due to humans, like deforestation, for instance, how the deforestation affected birds. So I spent a lot of time in the field. I was actually watching birds and trying to identify the different species in the different habitats. But then I had to go back to the office or the lab and try to analyze all that data from the field. So I spent a lot of hours in front of the computer trying to figure out all the data that I was bringing from the field. A big part of my PhD involved making maps. It was actually understanding where the different vegetation was in the region that I was studying. So I got to be involved in a lot of computer science, and I actually started loving that part as well. So I was having a great time. I graduated, everything was going great. And one of the nicest things about being a biologist is that you get opportunities to go to unique places in the world, like Antarctica. So I was hired to do a research on climate change and how it was how differences in temperature were affecting Antarctic species. So that was one of the most wonderful experiences in my life. I was surrounded by penguins and seals and obviously a lot of snow and cold. And we were only living with 14 other people. So it was an experience. After I came back, we decided with my husband to get married and to start our small family. There's my cat, India, and my dog, Raymond, and my husband, Diego. And after we got married, he got offered a job at Yale. He's also a biologist, but he's on the lab side. He's a molecular biologist, so he spends his days in the lab. So he was offered a position here, and we decided to come. It was a new adventure for the whole family, so we all came to New Haven. And here I was very lucky. I'm working at the Ecology and Evolutionary Biology department at Yale. I'm working in a research/conservation project, which is called Map of Life, in which we actually want to map or locate all species in the world and inform governments how to protect them and actually where they are. So I'm still in the academia, so I'm still doing research, but I am trying to apply everything I learned about how species were affected by changes and by human activities, and trying to help governments and NGOs to design strategies to protect biodiversity and the species. So these are, for now, my last stop. Who knows what's coming next? It's a big question mark, probably going back to Argentina and keep working towards conservation of species, but no one knows. We need to stay open to new opportunities. So thank you, and I hope we can chat a little bit more and I can answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Yanina. I think one thing we can see from all the speakers is that they're multi-talented and have traveled and tried so many different things to get to where they are. So our final speaker for the day is Olivia. So I'm going to hand it over to her. And she's a grad student in neuroscience.
My name is Olivia, and I'm a second year PhD student at Yale studying neuroscience. And so today I'll be talking a little bit about how I got into scientific research. So I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. Here's a picture of the skyline on the left. And when you think of New Orleans, you might think of great food. In the middle, you see a picture of a seafood po' boy. You might also think of Mardi Gras, which is what you see on the right with the parade. But when I think of New Orleans, of course, I think of my family. So I have two sisters. You can see them on the bottom left, along with my mom, and my dad and my stepmom on the right. And unlike some of the other speakers, as a kid, I was always very interested in science. It was something I was kind of naturally drawn towards, but no one in my family does anything related to science. So this was a new field for me, and as you'll see, figuring it out kind of involved a lot of trial and error for me. In high school, I had the opportunity to do a lot of different activities. Here's a picture of me with my soccer team. I spent a lot of time playing soccer, but I also had the opportunity to try out science in a non-school setting for the first time. So here's a picture of me competing at Science Olympiad, which is a competition where schools can bring teams of students who will compete in various science events. And you can see that I'm actually even holding a helicopter that I made myself. It really did not fly well at all, but I had a lot of fun working on these projects with my friends and challenging myself on the different types of scientific events. After I graduated high school, I went to college at Emory University, and I've always been very interested in what motivates people to make the decisions that they make. So I pretty quickly decided that I wanted to study neuroscience. And after taking some classes about the brain, I realized that I wanted to be involved in the research that helps create this knowledge. So because no one in my family was really familiar with working in science, I wasn't exactly sure how to go about getting started in a lab. So it took a couple years to get going on that. And after my second year at Emory, I ended up applying to a bunch of different research positions. And I did get a lot of rejections, but in the end, one program accepted me. So the summer after my second year, I worked as a research assistant in a lab at the Tulane National Primate Research Center. And there I learned how to grow cells in the lab. And I exposed them to the bacteria that causes Lyme disease to see how they would react. I learned a lot of fundamental skills in that position, but I realized that I wasn't really interested in studying cells or molecular biology. And instead, I was more interested in more bigger picture ideas, like what happens in the brain when humans and animals make decisions. So with that in mind, when I went back to college the next fall, I decided to join a lab that was studying how the brain is involved in memory and different social behaviors. So I worked with rhesus macaques, which are medium-sized monkeys that are pretty closely related to humans. And as you can see in the bottom left, in the lab, I tested how animals remember different objects. So you can see here that the monkey is shown an image, and then after a short delay, they have to select the correct image of the one that they had seen previously. And I really enjoyed this. But after doing this for a while, I decided that I wanted to shift my focus more to studying what the brain does as monkeys make decisions in social situations. I also felt pretty confident that I wanted to pursue a career in science, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to go to grad school right after college. So when I graduated from college, I decided to apply for jobs as a research assistant because I knew this would allow me to develop stronger research skills and really be sure that I wanted to go into science as a career and to be sure of what exactly I wanted to study. So after applying for a lot of positions, I got a job as a research assistant in a neuroscience lab at MIT. So this is the building I worked in. In the right picture, you can see this was a really cool sculpture that it might be hard to see on here, but it's a bunch of neurons hanging from the ceiling. And if you're standing in exactly the right spot, it looks like a brain. And so while I was there, I studied the social behaviors of marmoset monkeys, which you can see here. These monkeys use a lot of vocalizations, and they're pretty special because they engage in turn taking when they vocalize. So one of them will vocalize and then another will respond with a vocalization, which is pretty similar to how humans talk. So because of that, I studied the development of vocal communication in infant and adult marmosets. And so here you can see that there's an infant marmoset doing his very best to call out to his parents. And I really enjoyed what I was studying, but after a while, in thinking about all of my experiences, I realized that most of my past experience had been in research, and I began to wonder if there might be something else out there that I would enjoy just as much or maybe even more than research. So with that in mind, I applied for various jobs working in a business setting. So I got a job at Athena Health, which is a healthcare software company that makes the computer systems used by hospitals. My role was to work with the people who use these systems and get their feedback and work it into the product to help improve it. So I was really grateful to have the opportunity to try something new for a little bit, but working in this job helped me to realize all of the things that I really loved about research. I really missed the ability to express my creativity in science, and I got to do this by designing experiments and carrying them out and seeing the results. So I really missed that a lot. And because of that, I decided ultimately to return to my research position at MIT. And then from there, I applied for graduate school. But I really valued this experience, and it reminded me that a career path doesn't always have to be linear, and it's never too late to take some time to try something new. So after applying to graduate school, I decided to come to Yale to get my PhD in neuroscience, and I joined 2 amazing labs with fantastic researchers who I get to learn from and collaborate with. And here I'm still studying marmosets. I'm not so focused on vocalizations anymore, but I'm still studying social decision-making behaviors in marmosets as they decide to cooperate with other monkeys. And I feel very lucky that I get to pursue a career in science. So thank you to everyone for listening, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Olivia.
All right, welcome back from the breakout rooms, everybody. We hope you got a chance to ask some of your questions to our speakers. Just gonna make sure that all our speakers are back. Okay, so I think we have time for maybe like one quick question for everyone. So I'm just gonna ask all of you, how old were you when you first started research? So we'll just go in this order, and I'll start with Farrah.
I think, thank you for the question. I think I was around 20 when I started research. Yeah, definitely. It was like my end of my sophomore, beginning junior year of college.
Cool. What about Joe?
I think I was about 18. I got involved my first semester at college. So I think I was 18 or 19.
Cool. Yanina?
Sorry, I was muted. I think I was like 21 or 22. It was like a late, yeah, I didn't join a research lab at the very beginning of my study.
Cool. And Olivia?
Like Farrah, I think I was also 20.
Awesome. So yeah, so for those of you in our audience who are thinking about a career in research, you do have plenty of time to figure that out if that's the direction you want to go in. So yeah, I want to thank all of our speakers for taking the time to share your journeys with us today. I think we all learned a lot and got to see some really awesome talks. So thank you for being here.